Welcome to a detailed summary of the book The Adventures of Goodnight and Loving. Written by Leslie Thomas, this novel is a sprawling, globe-spanning adventure that blends humor, romance, midlife crisis, and self-discovery. Rather than following a strict linear plot, it unfolds as a series of episodes that together trace one man's attempt to run away from his ordinary life and from himself. The main character, George Goodnight, is a middle-aged lawyer working for a London newspaper. At the start of the story, his life looks stable from the outside, but internally, it has become empty and predictable. In a very short time, several things go wrong. His marriage begins to fail. A planned family holiday collapses. His car breaks down and is stolen. He feels increasingly trapped by responsibility and routine. Instead of confronting the situation, George does something impulsive. He literally walks away. While wandering in the English countryside, he passes through a gate and simply keeps going, beginning a journey he has not planned and barely understands himself. This symbolic step through the gate marks the start of both a physical and psychological escape. Early in his travels, George starts using the name Oliver Loving, a kind of alter ego. This identity gives him freedom. He can abandon expectations tied to his old life and reinvent himself wherever he goes. Throughout the novel, the tension between Goodnight, the responsible English professional, and Loving, the adventurous, impulsive traveler, becomes central. The two names reflect duty versus freedom, stability versus risk, reality versus fantasy. The story often suggests that Oliver Loving may be less a separate person, and more a projection of George's hidden desires, the man he always wanted to be, but never allowed himself to become. The novel is episodic. George drifts from country to country, accepting odd jobs and falling into unexpected situations. He funds much of this wandering by selling his prized stamp collection, piece by piece, a symbol of slowly letting go of his former life. His adventures include surviving danger and chaos, storms at sea and in the air, situations involving poverty and desperation, accidental involvement in criminal or morally grey events. These moments show how naive George can be, but also how adaptable he becomes. George repeatedly reinvents himself depending on where he is serving as an English butler in a wealthy American household, helping run a remote community, becoming entangled with eccentric travelers and exiles. Each episode works almost like a short story, testing a different aspect of his personality. Along the way, he experiences fleeting romances, exotic, sometimes intense relationships, and brief moments of true connection that rarely last. The pattern becomes clear. George keeps moving on before anything becomes permanent. Several events stand out as emotional anchors in the long journey: Christmas spent in prison, where the adventure narrative briefly slows into reflection and loneliness. Meeting people who remind him of family or the son he never had. Confronting the life he left behind. Searching for a girl switched at birth, a storyline that reflects the larger theme of mistaken identity and lost belonging. These episodes force George to think about responsibility and attachment, things he has been avoiding. Although the book feels like a travel adventure, the deeper story is about escape. George keeps moving because he fears disappointment and routine. Commitment feels dangerous after his marriage fails, and staying still would force him to examine himself. The novel gradually shows that endless movement is not freedom, but another kind of trap. Every new location repeats the same emotional pattern: excitement, connection, discomfort, escape. By the later stages of the story, George begins to understand he cannot fully erase his past. The Oliver Loving persona is incomplete. Adventure alone does not create meaning. The contrast between Goodnight and Loving softens as he recognizes both sides belong to him. The journey becomes less about geographical distance and more about accepting his own contradictions. The ending suggests a quiet realization rather than a dramatic resolution. George's travels have not solved his problems, but they have changed how he sees them. The novel's main message is that running away feels liberating at first. Identity cannot be escaped indefinitely. Love and belonging require staying somewhere long enough to be known. The adventure ultimately becomes a meditation on middle age, loneliness, and the search for purpose. It is both a travel novel and a psychological journey, a story about what happens when an ordinary man decides, quite literally, to walk out of his life and see where the road goes. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more.